What's the most you've seen someone be so out of touch with reality? My coworker's 17-year-old daughter had her first job interview recently. It was at a movie theater. When she got home, her mom asked how it went. "Daughter, I told them that I was only interested in a job that would let me work from home. That way, I can get snacks whenever I want." I would have loved to have been a witness to the interviewer's expression at that moment.
That's a classic move. It's funny how teenagers can be so straightforward about what they want. I can just picture the interviewer trying to keep a straight face while thinking, "This isn't how it works." Working from home at a theater sounds nice, but it's not really how jobs in that place operate. Just goes to show how their perspective on work can be so different from reality.
Went on a trip with an ex to Asia. She didn't like it because she couldn't understand why people didn't speak English. So she would just yell at them, "I need a napkin. Bathroomware." I pretty much told her to have some respect for people. Talk to them politely. She got all mad and fussy at me the whole trip.
It's wild how a trip can change things. My friend once went to Europe and couldn't handle the language barrier either. Instead of trying to connect, he just got frustrated. I remember telling him to chill and be open-minded. It didn't go well, and he spent most of the trip sulking. Ended up being a pretty awkward experience for everyone involved. Sometimes you need to adapt, not just complain.
Okay, so I was 15 and working at McDonald's. I was at the back window where you take people's money. A customer came and blew past the back speaker where you order. That was pretty typical, so I figured it was just a normal mistake. When they get to my window is the very old lady. She smiles at me, holds a grocery bag up with frozen chicken and a 2-liter of soda. She holds out a $20 bill and asks how much for the chicken and soda. 15-year-old me didn't have the coping skills for this. I stared at her for what felt like forever. Finally, I said, "I think you're confused." She drove off with her car halfway over the curb.
That's a classic mix-up. I can just picture that moment. As a teenager, I probably would have reacted the same way. It's so easy to freeze up when someone's not making sense, especially when you're not used to dealing with customers like that. It's funny how those little moments stick with you. And the image of her driving off with the car half on the curb is pretty memorable too. We've all had days like that.
My first job was running the cash register / drive-thru at a shitty Hardee's restaurant. Now, while nearly everyone that worked there was either in high school or in some stage of the recidivism process, this one middle-aged fella was a real gem. He claimed to have an IQ of 180, but refused to join Mensa because it was beneath him. Made thousands of dollars selling cigarettes to underage kids while he was in high school, and of course he went on to serve in the military as a Special Forces commando. He never did explain how he ended up 300 pounds washing dishes in a greasy kitchen while detailing his life story to a scrawny 16-year-old.
That sounds like quite the character. It's always interesting to meet someone with a big story, especially in a place you wouldn't expect it. I guess his life took a few turns. It's odd how people can end up far from where they started. Makes you think about choices and how they add up over time. Working at a place like that, you see some wild things for sure.
My house isn't that big. I only have 6 bedrooms, one of my classmates added one. This amazed me because the average number of bedrooms people have in my area are 3 to 4. UK, it was just the way they said it, as if it wasn't a big deal. Edit 2. This is a pretty big house in a fairly affluent area. The house is built further off the road, which is usually uncommon in the UK, and often referred to as a mansion in our friendship group, as a joke. Bedrooms are actual bedrooms, and they also have other rooms such as an office, etc. I'm not shitting on the rich, it just amazes me that some who are very fortunate can be blindsided.
It's wild how different perspectives can be. My friend talked about their home like it was normal, but for most of us, 6 bedrooms are a lot. It shows how some people just don't see their privilege. We joked about it being a mansion, but I think they really believe everyone lives like that. Just makes you think about how disconnected some can be from what's typical.
I used to work in a pizza place, and my boss, the owner, was one of the strangest guys I've ever met. He used to tell me that the world was run by reptilian aliens and that the moon was their base. He knew this because NASA once hit something off the moon and it sounded like a bell, and thus must be hollow and full of lizard people. Left that job after 3 weeks.
I had a friend who worked in a similar spot. The owner also had wild theories about aliens. He would talk about how they were watching us through our phones. It got weird fast. My friend ended up quitting too after a short time. Just wasn't worth dealing with that kind of talk daily. Sometimes you have to draw the line at pizza and conspiracy theories.
A good one. I went to school in at UBC for a year and lived in the dorms. One of the super rich Chinese kids that populated my school lived on the same floor as me. Her first day there, she took a shower in the public bathroom and then just left all her clothes strewn about. She assumed the maid would come pick them up and wash them.
That's classic. I had a roommate like that in college. He thought cleaning was for someone else too. Left his stuff everywhere, even in common areas. One day, we just piled it all together and left it outside his door. He finally got the hint. It's wild how some people think the world revolves around them.
My sister was just telling me this story. She went to a private high school in a very nice area with very rich kids. One day my sister sees one of her friends crying and quickly runs over to her to ask what's wrong. Her friend, through sobs, manages to say everything is just so unfair. I can't even believe my life. My sister is so concerned because this girl seems on the verge of a breakdown. After calming her down for a bit, my sister asks again what is bothering the friend, thinking maybe someone died or her parents are getting divorced. Well, you know my birthday is coming up, and so is my sister's. And, well, sobbing some more, my parents are getting us both brand new Range Rovers. And because she is older breaks down, she's getting the black one. But I wanted that one EE. The only thing my sister could do was say, "I am so sorry for you," and walk away. We still do feel bad for her. So detached.
That's a wild situation. Your sister must have felt really awkward. It's strange how some people can get so upset over things that seem small to others. Getting a brand new Range Rover sounds nice, but I guess the age-old sibling rivalry hits hard. At least your sister tried to comfort her, even if it was tough to relate. Just goes to show how different everyone's struggles can be.
My company is switching its non-exempt employees from a bi-monthly pay schedule to a bi-weekly pay schedule. Because of the reduction in per-paycheck pay, salary is divisible by 26 weeks now, versus 24 previously. Payroll is offering a one-time advance payment of the third paycheck in the upcoming 3-paycheck month, so that employees who live on a tight budget can divvy that up for bills or payments or whatever to transition to the impact of their new paycheck being slightly reduced. You have to notify payroll if you want to take this option. One manager couldn't wrap their head around the existence of people living paycheck to paycheck. They asked, couldn't they make more money? Couldn't they learn to save? Problem solved, duh. Funny thing is their nanny, whom they rely on for everything, is quitting because they aren't paying her enough and the cost of living here is too high.
It's wild how some people can't see past their own situation. The manager honestly thought budgeting was just a choice. Meanwhile, their own nanny is leaving because they won't pay her enough. It's a clear disconnect. People really don't get that not everyone is in the same boat. That's a tough spot for employees adjusting to a pay cut, while a little empathy could go a long way.
I had a friend who was going to Greece with her family and asked me to come. I told her sorry, I'd like to, but that's too expensive. She responded with, just ask your parents to pay. I'm sure they will. I could not for the life of me convince her that no, my parents would not pay to send me to Greece. She literally could not wrap her mind around the fact that some people's parents would not pay for them to go on vacation.
It's kind of wild how some people just assume everyone's situation is the same. I had a friend like that once, always suggesting expensive stuff. When I told her I couldn't swing it, she just didn't get it. It's like she thought money grew on trees for everyone. Makes you realize not everyone has the same background or support. A bit of perspective goes a long way in friendships.
My brother's best friend married a pretty rich girl. He said the first time he saw her do laundry, she was going through her pockets and throwing her loose change in the garbage. She had no idea that people kept their change. Genuinely thought everyone just threw it away. Edit. Holy shit, my first gold. Thanks, friend.
That's a wild story. It's funny how different worlds can be. For some, loose change is just pocket change, but for others, it's a few bucks. I remember a similar moment with a friend who didn't get why I saved up coins. It's interesting how our backgrounds shape how we see value in things. Makes you realize not everyone has the same experiences or mindset.
Had a coworker ask me what denomination I am. I replied, I don't believe in God. She was so dumbfounded that she didn't have a reply. 3 days later, she came back and asked if I was worried about going to hell or what Jesus would think. Had to explain I didn't believe in those either. She had no idea atheism existed. She was told in church that atheists were just people who were mad at God, but she thought that still meant they were religious. She was 43 years old.
It's interesting how some people have such a limited view of beliefs. I had a similar experience once. A friend of mine thought everyone had some sort of faith or higher power they believed in. When I told him I didn't, he kept asking if I was unhappy or lost. It was like he couldn't comprehend living life without that structure. You realize how different perspectives can be, even among adults.
I was in college just before 2000, and I remember talking to someone else in my dorm who was saying that she hoped that the end of the world would happen on January 1st, 2000. She was a devout Christian, a preacher's kid, and figured that if all the doomsday predictions were correct, it would mean the second coming of Christ, and she would get to go to heaven immediately. I remember people on both sides of the aisle being upset at her comments. Non-believers thought it was callous, when the implication was that she wasn't concerned about the fiery hell and chaos on earth for those who were left behind. Believers thought it was a ridiculous notion, when Scripture says that we're not meant to know the hour of his arrival. A number of people anticipating midnight on January 1st, 2000 isn't much of a secret.
I remember a friend in college who had a similar mindset. She always talked about the end times, hoping for some grand conclusion. It was strange hearing her say she wanted the world to end, believing it meant a ticket to heaven. People were divided, some thought it was insensitive, others just shook their heads. It really showed how differently people view faith and life, especially during that Y2K hype.
I got a good one. When my mom was 18-19, she joined the military, and as soon as she was able, she moved off base into a cheap little apartment with another girl the same age that she had met in basic. So one day my mom is alone and cleaning up their place when she notices this smell coming from her roommate's bedroom. She figures it's old dishes or food and goes to check it out. Room is spotless, but it reeks. My mom walks around trying to figure out where the smell is coming from. Finally, she looks under the bed and pulls out this box. It's dozens and dozens of bloody underwear. Her roommate had no clue about pads/tampons, and her own mother never told her. She would just change her clothes and toss the nasty panties under the bed. My mom had to sit down and have a talk with her.
That's a wild story. It's interesting how some people just aren't aware of basic stuff. Your mom stepping in to help that friend must have been weird but also eye-opening. It's funny to think about the things that can go unnoticed in a shared space. I guess it shows how important it is to communicate, especially about topics that seem simple to some. Glad your mom was there to have that talk.
My friend's parents once spent around $60,000 on a trip to Florida, which could have paid for my friend's entire college career or get their house out of foreclosure. Now my friend's parents, who he doesn't speak to anymore, have actual jobs again several states away, but recently he found out they've been getting into his Facebook through an old email and screenshotting his messages. Claims to have hired a PI to have him followed. Why? I have no idea. They've always been out of touch with reality.
That's a wild situation. Spending that much on a trip instead of helping with college is a strange decision. It's kind of messed up that they're invading his privacy like that. Clearly, there are some disconnects in that family. It must be tough for him to process all of it, especially if he doesn't talk to them anymore. Just a lot to unpack there, I guess.
We were at a table, 6 of us, eating. The conversation turned to jobs/employment. One of the guys, a rich kid that had most of his life handed to him, including his tech job at mommy's company, made the comment that he didn't understand why if someone couldn't find a job, they just didn't go back to school, get a degree, and try some more. He couldn't understand 2 things. 1, most families cannot support an unemployed adult student for the time it takes to get a degree. 2, the jaw-dropping one, was he thought that all colleges everywhere were free. His logic was that students go to college straight from high school, and they don't have money, so how else could they afford school? We live in the US, and this guy was 27 years old, and we had to tell him school costs money.
That's a wild moment. It's hard to believe someone can be so out of touch. It shows how different life experiences can shape perspectives. Most of us have a grasp on the struggles, but some just can't connect those dots. It's kind of funny, but sad at the same time. Like, living in a bubble can really skew your understanding of reality. Guess he needs to step outside his world a bit more.
My friend during high school had all the video game consoles from the current generation as soon as they were released, along with a bunch of games. My parents could afford new consoles only 2 years after release. In Brazil, games are expensive. My friend would argue why my father didn't work more to make more money, because whenever his father wanted more money, he'd make extra hours. His father was a director of a big car tires company.
It's interesting how different backgrounds shape our experiences. My friend had everything right when new consoles dropped, while I had to wait. His perspective on my family's situation was naive. It's hard to fathom that not everyone can just work more hours for extra cash. We all have our own struggles. In the end, we just enjoyed gaming together, despite the differences in our circumstances.
My dad was in the U.S. Marines for Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and had to escort a fallen soldier home for his funeral. When he attended the wake, the family was understandably upset, except for the father. After talking to him, he explained that he knew his son had been selected to be a secret agent, and that the body in the coffin couldn't possibly be his son. Very sad.
That's a tough situation. It's hard to imagine what the family went through, and the father's perspective just adds another layer of complexity. It must have been conflicting feelings for everyone involved. Makes you think about the sacrifices people make, and how they cope with loss in different ways. Just a heavy reminder of the realities of service and its impact on families.
Once at Costco, this scary old lady who worked there was staring at I and my siblings. She stopped in front of us, started laughing, and sniffed my little brother. She told my mother, "Your son is very elegant. Your daughter will have pain." My mom just said, "Oh God, no," and she walked off. Freaky stuff, man.
That sounds pretty wild. I can imagine everyone's reaction in that moment. Just a weird encounter at Costco, right? Kids can get a little freaked out by older folks acting strange. Your mom's quick response was probably just to keep it light. Probably not the kind of shopping experience anyone wants, though. Sometimes you just meet people who make you question everything.
One of my retail managers who said, "Oh, you could get a $500 apartment easy," when I was making barely over minimum wage, and he knew it back around 2009. And my manager in my first real job telling my friend, "You too should thank your parents for paying to put you through college." At which point we burst out laughing, because we paid for school ourselves.
It's interesting how some managers can be so out of touch. The line about the $500 apartment is wild. They don't really see what it's like. And that comment about college fees must have felt frustrating, especially since you guys handled it on your own. Makes you wonder how much they really understand about the struggles of their employees. It's always good to have a laugh about these things, though. Helps keep perspective.
My state didn't get a lottery until 8 or 10 years ago. When it first began in my state, a few friends and I went to a gas station to buy some scratch tickets. My friend bought a few of the expensive tickets, spending $30 or $40. She scratched them and didn't win anything, and then got really silent before asking, "Wait a minute, you mean you can lose money on these things?" I guess she thought the lottery was just free money or something.
That's pretty funny. I remember a time when a friend thought the same thing. We stopped at a store to grab some tickets, and he was so confident he'd win big. After scratching off nothing but losers, his face was just blank. It was like a light bulb went off. He was shocked that it's not all just free money. Kind of a reality check for him.
This is still one of my faves. At a New Year's Eve rave. Nothing too crazy, but this dude is enjoying his depth and focus complications from the MDMA, clearly out there. Then he starts chasing the laser patterns, still pretty normal considering. But then, he goes from chasing the lasers on the table to the floor. As he's getting up, he begins rubbing my belly. He doesn't see my face, but I can see the telltale signs that he is flipping out about how soft and warm this wall is, totally out of reality. Until he looks up and we make eye contact. Swear 5 seconds of just eye contact, until he smiles, peace signs, and backs off. It was the moment of eye contact when I realized he actually thought he was touching a wall, and this wallpaper was so soft.
This is a solid story. I've had moments like that too, where someone is so deep in their experience they lose touch with reality. Seeing that guy thinking he was touching a wall is wild. It's funny and kind of awkward at the same time. You both just shared this bizarre little moment without saying a word. Sometimes those brief connections and strange moments stick with you longer than anything else.
Was out to lunch with a coworker, and we were talking about his daughter. She had just been accepted to a university mid-tier state school with a reasonable scholarship, 30% of tuition. I asked, is she going to get a job this summer before school? His responses boiled down to, he would only allow her to work if she got a job that paid the equivalent of $40,000 a year and be part-time and have benefits. She has never worked a day in her life, but surely her stellar high school academic record will get her a great job as a programmer or a low-level manager. When asked where he came up with these insane numbers, his response was, I make about $120K a year and am just under 60, so I divided by 3 since she is 18. I feel sorry for his kid.
That's pretty wild. Kind of disconnect between reality and expectations. It's like he's putting a lot of pressure on her without any real experience. I mean, thinking she'll land a high-paying job right out of high school is a stretch. It's tough enough starting out. Hope she finds her own way and not just lives up to his standards. Sounds like she might need some guidance.
My ex-wife got her union job in the dot-com boom. My former MIL's career was literally got knocked up at 16 and lived off the dude and his pension ever since. Both of them think the reason I can't find work is because I'm just not trying. I'm an electrical engineer, and by all accounts a reasonably good one, but I just can't find work. I've got multiple placement agencies and recruiters looking. I've pulled in every favor in my network. I apply for every job that is even remotely related. And hell, I've been picking up money now temp jobs to pay the bills, like working in a warehouse. Right now, I'm working a term job, just started on Monday, and I'm worried that we misunderstood each other, and I'm dangerously underqualified, and I'm going to hurt myself or someone else or break something.
Sounds like you've got a lot going on. It's tough when people don't see the effort you're putting in. Your background in engineering should be valuable, but job hunting can be frustrating. It's good you're keeping busy with temp jobs, though I get why you'd be uneasy about being underqualified for the term job. Sometimes, just getting your foot in the door can lead to better opportunities later.
I was in high school, I'd say probably about 12 years ago, in weight room for my gym class. This one kid was quite muscular and not overweight, but had the cardio of a walrus. After getting a miserable time on his mile run, I told him it might help if he cut down on his pack-a-day smoking. He had legitimately never even realized that it would not be good for his lungs or cardio. I was apparently the first to make him realize it despite his being a junior or senior in high school, including mandatory health and phys ed classes.
That's a classic moment. You'd think someone would have pointed that out to him before. It's wild how people can overlook obvious stuff like that, especially when it comes to health. I guess some lessons hit harder when they're delivered from a peer rather than a teacher. It's kind of surprising he didn't make the connection himself after all those years in school. Just shows how varied people's awareness can be.
Every time I go to an Asian country, I've had a few, I'm just so blown away by the people making so much effort to try to understand what you're saying. Usually they do really want to help you, and often some locals want to practice English with you for fun. It's a good thing you made that trip with her, probably opened your eyes quite a bit.
I can relate to that. I visited a Southeast Asian country and had a similar experience. The locals were friendly and eager to talk. They really appreciated when you tried their language, too. I remember a shop owner who spent time helping me with my pronunciation. It did change my perspective on communication and how much effort people put into connecting with others. It's those moments that stick with you.
It sounds really cliché, but I know many professional chess players who are like this. In their field, they excel, achieving the Grandmaster title and earning a, sometimes good, sometimes bad, wage from playing in tournaments. But socially, they are inept. It will be difficult for them to transition into a career or even the most basic of jobs. There are only a couple of international chess players who are confirmed to be on the autistic spectrum. The others have merely grown up in a very insular and specific scene.
It's interesting how some people can be super talented in one area but struggle in everyday interactions. I had a friend who was a chess prodigy. He could dominate any game but felt awkward in social settings. While he found success in tournaments, the idea of networking or finding a regular job seemed daunting to him. It just shows how skills in one area don't always translate to others. Life can be complicated like that.
I love the just give me a job at your work requests. Typically, the person has zero background in any job that might be available, and then they seem to think I can just direct the general manager to hire my sort of friend without some sort of interview or vetting. Even if I had that power, there are many policies in place to stop nepotism from happening.
Yeah, I've had those requests too. It's awkward when someone thinks just knowing you is enough to get a foot in the door. It's like they don't realize there are processes in place for a reason. Plus, hiring someone with no experience just because they're a friend doesn't seem fair to anyone else. I try to explain it, but sometimes it just doesn't click for them.
Lady Welder here. Is it the metal industry in general that attracts these people? The way we smell? Because I swear that sounds similar to a sweet little old lady I encountered once at a yard sale while looking for scrap. She saw my pregnant friend and got into a conversation with us about Armageddon coming and how my friend needed to prepare her unborn child. Even went so far as to suggest some weird prayer ritual to ensure her child wasn't born as some rapture demon. Didn't mention the blood moon, but still thoroughly creeped us out, to say the least.
That's an interesting encounter. It's funny how people can have such strong beliefs, especially in unexpected places like a yard sale. It must have been a strange mix of concern and just plain weirdness. Pregnant friends definitely attract a lot of unsolicited advice, but that prayer ritual sounds like it crossed a line. Just goes to show how unpredictable human interactions can be, especially in odd settings.
Not unique to music. I do freelance software development on the side. The number of people who think that their stupid twist on social networking, usually that could just be implemented as a Facebook group or a subreddit or something, is going to make them a billionaire, and that I should therefore just work for Equity for free, is surprising.
I get that. I've had friends come to me with their wild app ideas, thinking they're the next big thing. They expect me to just dive in without a proper plan or budget, just because they're passionate about it. It's tough to explain that passion doesn't always equal success. At the end of the day, it's a job, and I need to get paid for my skills like everyone else.
I call that the washout rate, like the military. It's great to have big dreams. Pop star, astronaut, CEO, POTUS, actor, athlete, etc. But the number of people that want to be those things versus the number of people who could be those things make your odds vanishingly small. I'm always amazed at the sixth man on a high school basketball team that thinks he's going to the NBA.
Yeah, I get that. I had a friend who believed he'd make it to the NFL. Spent all his time training and talking about it. In the end, he played college ball but got cut from the team. It was hard for him to accept that sometimes dreams are just that, dreams. But he moved on and found something he's good at now. Sometimes the washout rate teaches you something valuable.
Funnily enough, during the Apollo program, part of the instrument package they would deploy on the moon would include seismographers in order to measure moonquakes. One of the ways they could figure out the interior of the moon was to crash the spent third stages of the Saturn V rocket onto the moon. They would in general know where the stage impacted the moon, and the waves generated from the impact would travel through the moon to the seismographs. NASA noted that the moon rung like a bell every time they did it for minutes at a time.
That's an interesting tidbit about the moon. I remember discussing it with a buddy who loves space. We laughed about how they literally smash things into the moon to learn more about it. It's wild to think the moon has its own seismographs and that it would ring like a bell. Just imagining the sound waves traveling through that barren landscape is kind of surreal.
Similar story. Was a field engineer on the construction of some very large, expensive dorms, University Center, at High Point University. Dorms included a 3-story waterfall, sports bar, steakhouse, arcade, free movie theater, etc. Very fancy. We kept a small staff to help the university with the first student move-in. Students were really pampered, but this was the worst case, I remember. One girl called for help because the power wasn't working in her dorm room. Our guys got there. None of her stuff was plugged into the outlets. We explained you have to plug things in for them to work. Reply: I guess our maid must have always taken care of that. She did not know how to plug something in. When we showed her, she still stood there expecting us to plug in all her stuff.
I had a buddy who was a tech guy in a high-end college dorm too. He told me about this student who couldn't connect her laptop to the Wi-Fi. When he arrived, she was just staring at her screen. Turns out, she didn't even know how to enter the password. He thought it was crazy, but I guess not everyone picks up those things. Some folks just expect tech to always work for them.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.